My name is David Nagel. I'm a professional developer slash educational consultant from Indianapolis. Been in education now for about 17 years. As a practitioner, predominantly at the middle school and secondary level, middle school and high school, but as a professional developer, I've really worked K-12 and even some K-16 work around a couple of key points, specifically standards and assessment, classroom instruction, but then also leadership and implementation. And I've done a great deal of work and study around the power of teacher collaboration. And in our field, for the longest time, we haven't not only had discussion, but also dialogue to create meaning, but then back to discussion to take action. And so that's been where a lot of my work has been, and a lot of my belief in how we change children's potential and how we drive home those key things is you and I sitting in a room, and together we might have a phenomenal idea. Independently, we might not. And so we have to have that structure where people can collaborate, feel safe. But as leaders, administrators, principals, we have to provide that time and that structure. So that's what I've been doing, and excited to continue to do now through this new lens of visible learning. Visible learning, to me and to a lot of people, I believe is the construct through which everything else we do within our schools fits, because it is what we do, how we should do it, and why we should do it. To me, the power of visible learning comes from two lenses that I always try to apply. And the first one is the lens of being an educator and working with other people's children. And that took on a different meaning when I started to have my own children. And as Dr. Hattie teaches us, the power of visible learning is to make sure we help students exceed their potential. And I think too many times in our profession we have maybe sold some students short and looked at possibly if there was a ceiling or if there was at least a bar to get them over. But any student's potential that we don't help them meet or exceed, we need to look at that as a tragedy. And so we do that through, I think, two ways that we learn through visible learning. One is through mind frames, belief in learning and belief in each other, and belief in dialogue, not monologue. Belief in that assessment is for me, is for us as a school, of what we can learn and how to adjust. And as I mentioned before, by looking at other people's children through the eyes that I would have of my own, it's allowed me at times to not only become more immersed in the work, but I think help share with other practitioners how we try and dive in of what those practices should be, but also what our belief is. The second thing I think that visible learning is to everybody, and as a power for educators, is so many times teachers have been so busy and they have been so well intended, and I know I was one of them, that I wasn't quite sure if what I was doing was not only the right thing to do or if I was doing it well. To me, the power of visible learning comes from, as an educator, first to acknowledge that I am the most important thing that can happen in my classroom. And while there are factors outside that might influence me, they will not have the direct impact on me as my classroom practices might. So, and then finally, I think the biggest thing visible learning is a balance between the art and the science of teaching. And so many times, I think the science hasn't been put up at the forefront. The science, maybe it doesn't trump, but if I take my son to the hospital, I want that doctor to have a good bedside manner, but not in place of proper diagnosis. So the science might even need to come first, the science and the power of effective feedback and what that looks like, what true response to intervention programs need to be, as they are one of the highest effect size. But then also the art of teaching, because feedback, as I mentioned, which falls at number 10 in Dr. Hattie's rank right now of 150. Right after that is teacher-student relationships, and there's an emphasis on teacher first and student second, because as the adult, it's my job to build that relationship with that student. Just like back to my hospital metaphor, the more that doctor can relate to my son and make him feel at ease, the better chance that medicine's going to work. And I think what visible learning can do for teachers is to validate the art and the relationships and all those things I think most of us went into our profession for, but then provide the science of what to do, and maybe as a capstone to so much more know thy impact, to know what I am doing matters and what I am doing is targeted for not only my one individual student, but maybe for my students as a whole.